jump right in with Southeast Asia subregions and talk about Burma or Myanmar. And we talk about that distinction a little bit in the book, where we talk about Burma being the name of the country, of the state, but Myanmar, faction there that referring to the country there, more and more people actually internally referring to the country in that way. However, Aung San Suu Kyi, leader, and those, the book states that we follow the protocol of the United States. We refer to it as Burma, and then parentheses, Myanmar, so country highlighted there. So the Rohingyas, we remember, is a mostly Muslim group of people that are persecuted in the Rakhine state, and we're quite mad that there's a lack of action going on there. So they're going in and out of Bangladesh. So you can see this area where there is quite a close proximity to each other. And so these people fleeing, coming over the border, across the border each way, when we talk about the Rohingya that are being persecuted, and a lack of inaction due to their persecution from Aung San Suu Kyi, who, again, we remember was a, I'm not going to mention her again, so she's not on here, so I'm going to mention her now. So remember, she won a Nobel Peace Prize in 1991. She was on house arrest for 15 years. She was released in 2010. She becomes powerful and helps select the president in 2016, where she's now state counselor, first state counselor in Burma in 2016. And many people are upset and disappointed that her body of work over the years and winning a Nobel Peace Prize and the like should certainly make her address this issue that she's largely been blind about. But what we have is a Muslim minority, the Rohingya, being persecuted in the Rakhine state, and they're fleeing to the country of Bangladesh, where there are refugees. And we talked about that lightly the last time, and here we go again. So again, Myanmar, this is Burma, this is just a big hodgepodge of facts. But to move a little bit further, teak wood trees, that teak, we talk about mahogany, we talk about teak wood trees and other natural resources are a main part of that extractive property of the economy in Burma. One teak wood tree goes for about $200,000 US. So no reason, other than preserving the natural landscape, we understand why they're being destroyed and shipped to wealthy countries. And another last thing that the book sums up, I'm just summarizing the book in these areas. In 2011, Burma supplied opium to 60% of the U.S. heroin market, making them back and forth the #1 supplier for the United States between Burma and Afghanistan. So that's something that they can talk about. So here are pictured here, the Rohingya, that group, that large refugee crisis that's taking place in the Rakhine state into Bangladesh. Picture here of teak wood, so we understand that. Aung San Suu Kyi, the leader that I've been referring to periodically. And lastly, high, medium, and low areas of opium poppy growing areas, and we can see high largely only concentrated in Burma near the Chinese border. Moving on to Thailand. So we talked about it before, the avoidance of European colonialization, when referred to Siam before. They were referred to as an Asian tiger economy, the fastest growth rate in the world from 1975 to 1998. Very impressive economic prosperity and growth in that time period. We remember that it's politically unstable, the political instability there. We've had 12 coups from 1932 to 2014. That's dramatic, to say the least. Nevertheless, it's stable-ish, as the book states. And we discussed the importance, I wouldn't necessarily the importance, the magnitude of the sex industry that is present in Thailand specifically, but in the region as a whole. So Wat Cheng Man is a temple in Thailand, wet rice production. So finally we get a chance to see that wet rice production, or that paddy rice, very water-intensive, methane-producing type of rice production. And the military in Thailand, I think it's worth showing a picture of that to remind us of the political instability because of the coup d'etats that take place there, sadly, almost every couple of years. And lastly, Hangover 2 reference, because we have to, but Hard Rock Cafe Bangkok, and I think it's, well, I wouldn't say it's helpful to have watched the movie to understand Bangkok, because that's just certainly one side of it. It's one side that the American movie industry portrayed, and also one side of all that Thailand has to offer, even all that Bangkok has to offer. But there again, you've probably seen the movie, quite popular, and there is a part of Bangkok, Thailand that you have probably seen portrayed in that film, accurately or inaccurately, based on what you'd be pulling out of that film. So Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, another region. So a little link there, we click on that, a little bit about the Vietnam War. Formerly French Indochina, we talked about that earlier. These three countries were held by the French. They're largely communist states with measured amounts of free market capitalism. Most populous in this region, this sub-region, would be Vietnam, closing in on 100 million people. The sharing of the Mekong River, all these countries share the Mekong River before it flows out into the ocean. And the Vietnam War from 1955 to 1975. The United States largely ends their time in 1973. But the Vietnam War didn't just take place in Vietnam, it impacted this entire region. And it was quite profound in terms of it being almost 20 years long. 19 years, 5 months, give or take. So we are moving. Here we are. Angkor Wat, a very famous temple in Cambodia. You can see a rural landscape depicted here in Laos. Ho Chi Minh is a city in southern Vietnam, and juxtaposed here with Hanoi in northern Vietnam. And you can see very urban, dense urban population, about 100 million people in the country of Vietnam. And actually, since the Vietnam War, the communist state has provided health care for their people, education. Some 80% had reached the 5th grade just after the war, and health care was provided, and it's actually, because of the communist state, it's somewhat of a success story, if you will, in the region in terms of its economic prosperity. And again, prosperity is a term that would be relatively speaking. Malaysia, Brunei, and Singapore is depicted here. You could largely only see Malaysia, Singapore being here, and Brunei there. But most economically successful sub-region in Southeast Asia. These are the richest of the countries in this area. There's a diversity of Malaysia because it's largely situated on the Malay Peninsula, as well as the island of Borneo. And there's a discussion of the ethnicity of the different peoples and a little bit of the religion also of Malaysia, and the elegance and success of Singapore. The book spends quite a bit of time talking about how beautiful Singapore is and how nice it is. And so here we see a mosque in Brunei, quite elegant, but we use elegance to describe Singapore, its pristine streets and its cleanliness and its very detailed planned city planning. Kuala Lumpur, the capital of Malaysia, another urban area, and Kuching, Malaysia, again, another city in Malaysia, one that's certainly not urban or densely populated as the capital, Kuala Lumpur. Indonesia, 4th most populous country in the world, behind the United States. Well, let's go in order. China, India, the United States, and then Indonesia. The importance of Islam, we know it is the country, it's got 250 plus million people. It is the number one nation for Islam in terms of population. And we said before, 3,000 inhabited islands, 17,000 total, and a national identity to try to put together. Lastly, seen here, the Sumatran tiger, the island of Sumatra, Borneo, Java, Bali here, Sulawesi. And so Sumatran tiger, one of those species that is at risk there. Bali, Indonesia, as discussed in the book. Jakarta, Indonesia, one of their primate cities, if you will, one of the largest cities in the region. And then again, reiterating the importance of Islam to the country of Indonesia. And lastly, if I can just not keep from skipping around all over the place, would be the Philippines. So this island nation of about 7,000 islands, a Spanish colony for a lot of years, until the Spanish-American War, where the United States would take over the Philippines and hold that area, even having a military base there until the early 1990s. It's not totally independent, though. Rodrigo Duterte has been elected as head of state there. He's been in the media for simply putting a call out to kill all drug offenders, to try to take control of the dangers of the drug industry that's in place in the Philippines what would we say? Somewhat of a crime spree, if you will. So this is taking place. This isn't like, it's something that's not. I mean, it's like wreaked havoc like any sort of drug epidemic, and in order to curb it properly, he believes that in some cases just killing the people would be easier rather than some form of incarceration. So it's gotten in the news as this kind of strange guy. Definitely probably a violator of human rights, and so that's him. ISIS, I don't include that, it's probably not that necessary, but in some of the southern islands, ISIS's flag has been raised, largely away from these urban areas, and the leaders of the Philippines of the years has just sort of not had total control in these areas. So the flag of ISIS has been raised there, but just something that's relatively noteworthy, and the book discusses it just briefly. So pictured here, Rodrigo Duterte, their leader. Also seen here again, the Philippines, an island nation, so we don't want to just think of, we've watched the movie Metro Manila, so we see Manila, Philippines, and we see this aerial view of the Tondo slum here of Manila, the Philippines, and we've seen what that is like, and we've seen that real life depiction of the urban life in Manila in the Philippines. But we also know that the Philippines is an island nation. There's a lot of biodiversity, a lot of beauty there as well. Not that we can't find beauty surely in the city, but more natural beauty seen here. And again, just to reiterate, 83% Roman Catholicism, because that Spanish history, and so a more famous church as seen here, St. John the Baptist, or known there ethnically, the Quiapo Church. And so that wraps us up with Southeast Asia subregions.